Y is recorded in front of a live studio audience.
So one thing I want to mention to you before I forget, and I started recording so we can get this. So, like every other suburban hamlet and town across America,
Yes.
there is a Facebook page
Oh,
where people
yes.
post their, I'm looking to get my entire house painted for free. Do you know anybody?
Yes.
I'm looking for a fully insured contractor who likes to bid on work on scene, and where can I get tapas? These type of things.
Yes.
So this afternoon, I thought I had sort of seen some of my favorite. I thought my favorite one had been seen. People posting pictures of their budgie, freaking out and being like, who can help me fix this? Seriously. So this one, so it wasn't in our town group. I'm sorry. It was in the group for our town's moms.
Oh, even
Okay.
better. You got subgroups.
The entire post. Personally, I love the people who put TIA at the end and an exclamation point.
What's that?
Thanks in advance.
Oh.
Or the okay, here's what I need, and I know you guys will have it.
Yeah.
But this one, I would hold it up, but you can't even read it. Does anyone know of... Here's the question they posted. Okay. Does anyone know of a really good Sia cover band? Thank you.
And?
I don't think there's been any response. Is there such a thing?
I'm sure there probably is such a thing.
I thought Sia was her own thing.
This is Why, with your hosts, Heidi Hedquist and Luke Poling.
Yeah, I just did a Google, and all I'm finding are people covering Sia songs, but not a band devoted solely to her catalog. So, when the show fails, here we go.
You can be Sia.
Oh, please. Just put that wig over my eyes and let's go. I don't know. I can think of a lot of things where you're like, that'd be a weird cover band that probably exist.
Yeah.
I
the
mean,
cover band market is, we could do an entire something on
no,
cover
I
bands.
mean, completely. Just Mini Kiss is fascinating.
Right. So
simply
fascinating.
Because of the amount of kissness they need to cover.
Right.
Because didn't Mini Gene say that he does the full God of Thunder?
Oh, yeah.
Blood spitting and fire spitting.
Yes.
Oh, you've seen them. Yeah.
Yes. They do it all.
I've only seen one cover band in my life, and they were amazing. And I wish I could remember their name. It was a Prince cover band in Vegas.
Okay.
And I want to say it was Purple Rain, REIN. But
that's what I was going to suggest. But
halfway through their set, the lead singer disappears for a second, comes back. He's now Morris Day, and they do a bunch of time songs.
Come on.
What more do you need? What more do you need?
We need a little Morris Day on this show. That's what we need.
Yeah, what's he up to? Who's his press agent?
But we should find him.
Yeah.
He was going to play. Remember, wasn't he going to be at Juggalo?
Yes.
The Juggalos.
Yes.
So bizarre with CNC Music Factory. So as someone who has a lot of experience seeing
with Juggalos,
and Juggalos dating, I have dated a lot of cover band lead singers and a lot of Juggalos.
And
so
can I see that Venn diagram of is it just one circle?
It pretty much is. Yeah. Oddly, it's pretty much one band, but that's not the point. There's a lot of attention to detail that goes into cover bands, like
a quality cover band.
Yeah, and when the 80s band revolution launched here in 1998. It is
Hmm.
still playing in 2021, two sold out shows constantly. They made sure that they had every detail, like they had the moogs and they had this and this was the exact sound that Duran Duran used for this, and it is pretty hardcore.
The name of your book is How to Take Your Clothes Off. How do you start? Do you go pants or shirt first?
It really depends. I guess I've never really thought about it. Whatever feels best at the moment, I guess.
Okay, fair.
Mm.
So, when did you get into naturalism? And is that the term you
It isn't
prefer? Is it
actually. There's
okay?
naturism or nudism. Naturalism is the study of the natural world. So that's a common problem where naturalist walks and naturist walks would be completely different audiences potentially.
Yeah, that could get
Um,
awkward awfully quickly.
and both are wonderful. I have a great love and respect for the natural world. But yeah, you want to know who you're dealing with, I think, in both cases. So I do call myself a naturist. I see naturism and nudism as fairly interchangeable words. I use them fairly interchangeably myself. But when I'm asked for mine, it's naturist. And I started, I guess, in my early 30s. So about 15 years ago or so, when I first got a high-speed internet connection and I started to find groups online. I'd kind of been aware that this was a thing all my life. I'd kind of heard of nudists. My parents had sort of joked about nudists and this kind of thing, but I'd never really realized that it was a thing people did most of my life. And when I discovered it, I found that I was really, drawn to it. And after getting into communities online for a while, I found places near me, and I started to actually go and try it out. And from the first time, I realized, no, this is me. This is exactly who I am.
What was it about that first time or every time you go? What is it that you really love?
I think we talk about there's the physical sensation. Having the sun and air on yourself in totality is really different from any other uh, way of being. And the first time you try it, the first time you're out there naked is really almost overwhelming, essentially. And so there's that side of it, but there's also the feeling as I've done it more and more, as I've gotten into social naturism, so being naked with other people, with strangers, with friends, whatever it might be. I really find that there's a feeling of like you're occupying your authentic self. Is how I try to put it. One person put it as it's like I'm cosplaying as my real self. And that's exactly. It's a really interesting way to think about it because we do put on so much, right? And I'm not just talking about clothes. I'm not just talking about. It's everything we do, and this is an opportunity to get down to who we really are. And I think that's what's so valuable, and what brings me back to it, and what brings a lot of people into it.
So is this something that you participate in all the time, or is it something that's just you save for vacation? How often are you engaging in more of the social nudity? Obviously, nudity at home all the
Yeah.
time,
Go to town,
but
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Well,
pretty much, and I do have a day job that luckily I'm able to work from home, but I certainly am respectful of those on calls with me.
Sure, of course.
um, but also, and yeah, home, basically I'm free to be in whatever state I wish to. Although I do have an older relative who lives in our home as well, so we're sort of respectful of each other's space in that way too.
Sure.
But with social naturism, it's something, of course, that basically for the last year has been nigh impossible. I was scheduled to go for, we have a local swim group through the winter, and I was scheduled to go for the first time I've had the opportunity to go in some time, the weekend that my province shut down because of the
No.
pandemic. So it was really frustrating, and but I'm not. I take part in it to be with others of the same mind.
Mhm.
There's something about being uh, in that nature space and nude with other people. There's a shared vulnerability that is really part of the draw for me as well, because we can. It's people. Naturists like to talk about how we're really open, we're really friendly, that kind of thing. I think it's different than that. I don't think it's about a certain kind of openness. I think it's that we all share in that vulnerability, and that puts us on a different plane with each other as people, and that is really hard to find in other spaces. Yes, we have friends and stuff that we can be completely honest with and that kind of thing.
Sure.
But all our relationships are kind of mediated through all these different things that we cover ourselves in or that we inhabit. And in a naturist context, it's just that different that you can lose so much of that. And that feels emotionally and spiritually, it's a far different experience.
And clearly, this is very much a part of your personality and part of your life now. Which one sort of feels it, like you're not yourself? Is there one that if you're at home or at work and you're clothed, do you feel, obviously you feel different, but is it feel like sort of, like you said, you can get down to a much different emotional truth with your friends who are of like mind?
Well, I guess it's not that I reject clothing or anything like that, and I mean, I think there's often an idea that nudists are sort of like forcing their naked bodies on the world, kind of thing, and that's never the case. That's a good trope for for animated shows and stuff like that, but it's not something that happens in real life. But there are friends. Especially when I was first starting out, there were a couple of friends that I sort of talked to about it and sort of admitted to, this sort of preference of mine, and that did, even though none of them were interested or expressed any interest in taking part. Opening up that much, that was that kind of openness that talking about, and I mean that can be about any sort of close personal truth that we're sharing with others, but it's just one that I share that way. It doesn't make other relationships, for example, professional relationships, my coworkers, it doesn't make it a bad thing. And I mean, I'm closer to some coworkers than others, and I like to be an open and honest person to whatever extent I can, right? But it does highlight to me how different it is to be a naturist and to be in those naturist relationships.
Have you found that your time, being a naturist has it changed your outlook on the world in general?
It has. There's a couple of different ways. One is it's hard to be open and naked with someone, like to have that experience of being really exposed in a mutual way that makes your outlook a lot more empathetic, I think. And empathy is an important quality that is maybe in short supply in the world at times. And I think it's one of the things that makes us really succeed as humans, when we can find that empathy and find that understanding of other people. And that experience of being in a socially nude space really kind of educates one on how that empathy can exist. There's also I think maybe a more practical, like acceptance is a word that's thrown around a lot, bodily acceptance and stuff like that. And I don't know if I could ever have reached a place of bodily acceptance without having seen the true self of every manner of person, whether
Yes.
it's from young people to at the club that I go to most often, there's a guy who goes around with a walker. He's that
Mhm.
he needs that for his mobility, and people of every shape, every ethnicity, and all those attributes, and the attributes that we tend to show off more or hide more. And I mean, it's not as though we can't see things like, again, naturists like to talk about how, well, there's no class markers. Well, there are. Your teeth, your hair, your tattoos. There can be a lot of things that still
You're tan.
and just by being in a naturist space will often cost a little bit more to spend your weekend at a nudist resort than it does at a public park. But I really think that I gained an appreciation for others, and how they exist in the world, but also for myself. And I realized very soon that my own feeling about my own body was very much mediated by my clothing. And it wasn't my body that was making me feel bad; it was my clothing that was making me feel bad. And that doesn't mean that I strive for, I do actively work to be physically fit and that kind of thing. But I can put a lot aside, knowing that my body is it can relate to the world in a different way, and I think that's really important too.
Yeah, I so get that. So my family spend a lot of time on Kupakoi Beach and Club O in St. Martin, Club Orient and Kupakoi. I have family members who are way into nudism, friends who are way into it. I'm sort of halfway there. Top half.
Right, right.
But there are those bottomless people that I haven't quite figured out yet.
Mhm.
But I think that's one of those things that you do find there is just everybody's body is quirky. Everybody's got weird stuff going on. It's nobody fits a mold. It's really interesting.
It's absolutely true, and I actually found that my first couple of times I went to my first time was at an unsanctioned nudist beach in my area, and it's on Lake Erie, and it was sort of a very easy place for me to sort of go to, and there's no if I didn't like it I could leave. I didn't really sink a lot of time or cost into it, so I went there, and I for the first time was among others, and that was my sort of experience of like, well, this is me, this is what I want. And I found that when I went home, like walking down the street, going to work the next day, I was kind of seeing people differently, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it sound like I was imagining them naked, but I kind of interpreted people's bodies differently. And I think that's really, seeing people naked. It's actually been shown in studies that it changes our perception of people, and it's a positive thing for how we understand our own bodies and others. And it was absolutely true.
It sounds like we're about the same age, and I feel like for a long time in the 80s and especially earlier, like the idea of a nudist club or anything like that was very much, I think, like you said, sort of a punchline, and there was a very hippie element to it.
Mhm.
Um, it sounds like it's not like that much anymore, that it's a much more open. And have you seen that change since you've started?
I would suspect that, at least in my lifetime, it hasn't really been that way. And even when you go into the history, people have been very serious about naturism in North America since the late 1920s, early 1930s. But there's a societal narrative around nudity, and that feeds into the societal narrative around nudists. And as I said, the myth that they have to be naked all the time, or that they're going to impose their nakedness on others. And it's these ideas of our society's discomfort with nudity, discomfort with the body, automatic sexualization of nudity, especially when it comes to women's bodies. These things all feed into these ideas around it. I don't think the narrative in the public has changed too much. I think that maybe as we're all encountering the ubiquitous camera that is, a part of has been part of our society more and more in the last 10 years. Maybe we're getting to the point where we understand that, it's not such a big deal. And maybe that's leading people to say, well, I could see skinny dipping. And that's kind of the gateway drug, right? For some people.
Yes.
Well, and Europe and other cultures are much more open and free with the body and nudity and completely cool with it, and it is part of other cultures. I don't want to say why is it that North Americans are so uptight, but do you see that loosening at all, or is it still everyone's pretty tightly wound, if you will?
I don't think it's loosened too much in North America, certainly on a mass scale. We still, as I say, those narratives are pervasive. And one of the things that I was trying to do with my book and with my blog was try to sort of add that alternative, that sort of safe alternative to, maybe this isn't so crazy, maybe it's not so awful kind of thing. It's funny though, in Europe, their attitudes are changing as well, in the opposite direction. That places where topless sunbathing was just unremarkable is now much more rare in France, Spain, Italy, because cameras are around,
Um,
and people are lurking, and people are.
yeah.
And, I hate to blame everything on men, but here we are.
Let's go that. Yeah, let's do that.
Are lurking around, taking
Fine with
photos.
me.
Yeah, and with me too, actually. But there is there's a gender issue in society, and that leads to a lack of safety for women in being anything but covered up, and it's very sad. It's very unfortunate, and I don't know that it's easy to change, but we've seen that drift in Europe. I think in general the public idea of nudity is still not that changed very much. It's not that remarkable, not that important. People don't go calling their legislative representative because there's a nipple on TV, as they do in some places. But we still do. We are seeing that movement away from it, even as North America maybe is inching away from the idea of that the body must be covered at all times.
Go ahead.
Oh, here we go.
Go ahead.
Well, and that's the interesting thing about your blog. Like, it's very fact-based, it's very non-judgmental, it's just there. And I think that's how I found you. And I've found the blog is very much, I think you don't have photos, and it's very much like we're not going to discuss the sexual side of this because it isn't in this culture.
Exactly.
And it's much more stating out the case of, well, here's why this person is comfortable with this and enjoys this.
Mm-hmm.
And it does such a great job of introducing the concept and sort of talking about in very simple and easy terms that anybody can kind of read it and go, oh, okay. Yeah, whether or not it's for you, it's just much more like give it a shot. You might enjoy it.
Yeah, it's kind of trying to put my hand out to others, and that's definitely when I first the book came before the blog, and that was my whole thing was, there's people who have these ideas about it, think, I've heard of it, it sounds great, for some reason I'm drawn to this. And I know I was in that situation myself. I was reading online about nudism for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years before I actually took the opportunity to try it. And I had a lot of doubts and questions, and that was my impetus was, if I've got all these doubts and questions, other people do too. And it turns out they're not that big a deal. And so the book was closer, and that's why the title is how to take your clothes off, because we all know how to do that. It's all that straightforward. And really the secret hidden truth is it is that straightforward. You can feel better naked if you want to. You don't have to. You don't have to like it. Maybe it's not for you. But if it is, you can try it, and it's that easy. And once you try it, or once you say, I want to do it, like, there's the step. Take your clothes off. Now, okay. And then that does lead into other topics, which is why I started the blog, because there are other things to talk about. And there are different aspects that I wanted to sort of deal with that are not really suitable for a book length thing, but for a few hundred words on a blog kind of make more sense. But that's exactly it. And I hope that it comes across as welcoming and encouraging. That's certainly how I try to approach it, because that's what I want. I want people to experience this.
And one thing I wanted to ask you that I found on the blog, for my own edification, and also so we don't look like jackasses when we post this episode, you have a post called How to Cover Nudists the Wrong Way. And you're talking about a article that a reporter in Australia wrote. And you were saying just, from using the phrase, I think it was like, bare truth or skinny, whatever. And that down to the idea of sort of the first 3 paragraphs being about, oh my God, there's a naked dude here. What are the things that are sort of inherently part of, what do we call it? The non-nudists, clothiers, clothists? What is the sort of terminology that they use that sort of stigmatizes nudism or naturalism in a way? Sorry, Adrian, that stigmatizes it in a way that kind of makes it harder for other people to get over that hump and see it for what it really is.
Well, there is this narrative, as I said, around in society, in Western society, around nudity, and I think that journalism is going to run with those narratives wherever they can, because it gets, I don't want to say it gets clicks, there is part of that, but it does compel people to read and to engage, and it's an easy way in, and journalism has a very narrow window of attention to get somebody to actually engage with their article. So I get it. And there's better and worse ways to do that. And that's where I tend to be. My Twitter feed started as most of my early tweets were about bad journalism, about nudism. And, so it's been a topic on the blog as well, of course. And yeah, there's these ideas. Okay, so there's ideas like nudity, and therefore nudity is kind of ridiculous. Therefore, nudists are inherently ridiculous, and that's why it's okay for an otherwise serious journalist and all the editors and everybody else who's involved in the production of this piece of journalism. We can all agree nude people are kind of stupid and weird and ridiculous, so it's okay to joke about them. I live in the Toronto area. The Toronto Star years ago had an article on the sanctioned nudist beach in our area, and it was full of these ridiculous puns like that. Not just bare facts, but cheeky and abreast and these kinds of things, and words that
Good one.
I defy you to find in any other article in the Star in that week.
Yeah.
And they feel there's license to do this because it does play into a narrative that they know their readers in general are going to have. My work, I try to name and shame those journalists on Twitter a little bit because I think it's important to point out that this is bad journalism. This is not, and it doesn't get to the truth of the matter, which if journalism is about anything, it's about that. It's about getting to the truth. And they are deliberately giving up that mission in favor of whatever else, complimenting their readers on their prejudices and that kind of thing, right? And so that's I do have a strong reaction to that, and I think that, and I also try to call out journalists who do a good job. I was interviewed a couple of years ago for The Atlantic online by a journalist there, and I've been a huge reader of The Atlantic Monthly for many, many years, decades, and to have her interview and then treat the subject so seriously, and not that they can't be critical, but they need to take it as though it's another subject. And honestly, if you said something about a religious group or an ethnic group in the way they talk about nudists,
Right.
it would be completely unacceptable. And I'm not equating nudism with either of those things, but it does show the journalistic tendency away from their own principles when they do deal with this particular subject.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I answered your question there.
No, I think
No,
you did.
You did.
And it is such an interesting, because I think one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you is the thing that people are interested in this. People are curious. People have questions. As far as like the reporting that does cover it well, is it the first person, I went to this, took off my clothes, and oh, hey, it wasn't a big deal? Or is it just simply the tone of the writer not coming in with these sort of prejudices, and we're going to treat this as kind of icky, or even something to giggle about?
Yeah, there's a couple of dynamics that I find tend to make that journalism worse. One is this idea of us and them, where I'm going to put them in a certain box, and I'll come into as a journalist with my own hangups or whatever reason I'm going to decide. And so there have been articles where I went to a nudist club and I refused to take my clothes off, and it's sort of like it's like I covered a sport and I refused to learn the rules or something like that.
Right.
There's also, and so that leads them treating nudists as, some weird animal in the zoo and that kind of thing. And again, it's just poor journalism to do that. And when I talk about the hang-ups, a lot of times the journalists, instead of talking about what they ostensibly have decided to report on, and again, we're not demanding they cover us, they're deciding to use this because it'll get some interest, right? And they'll talk about their own hang-ups and why they don't like being naked and why they, their own bodily things. And I don't think that's really the appropriate subject. So the good journalism is coming in, and it may be like somebody trying it out and giving it an honest try and then talking about their feelings. And I don't care if it's positive or negative. It's just that they actually treat it like it's in a reasonably neutral journalistic fashion. There's also been, there was an article in the New York Times recently about a bunch of nudists in Florida who have like a dinner club, and they just go to each other's houses. They're in a nudist community. They go to each other's houses every weekend. They 6 or 8 of them, and they have dinner. They rotate around who makes the dinner and stuff like that. And it was just very neutral, pleasant reporting, and why they do what they do, why they live where they live, what brought them to this. And it was remarkable reporting, just because it didn't rely on any of these other reasons to talk about people being nude together, or any of these ridiculous assumptions that society arms them with. And really, in the end, I think what good journalism does is talk about people. And if you talk about nudists as this ridiculous weirdo kind of cult or something like that, you're not talking about them as people. If you look at why they're there, who they are, why they are, that's when you start to get to who they are, who they are as real people, and then good journalism can go ahead. And yeah, I'll even forgive an editor slapping up bare facts about naturism on the headline, if the journalist can go in and actually treat nudists as people, because otherwise, if they don't, what they're doing is using nudity as a reason for people to read their article, and that's pure exploitation. And again, for any other group, I won't say any other group, for most other groups, that would not be acceptable. For nudists, for some reason, because we have these societal narratives, it is. And that's what I react against.
Well, yeah. And of the nudists I know, they are from all walks of life. They are
Mhm.
CEOs, they're chairmen of the board, they own publications. It's everybody. And you're not, focusing on a bunch of weirdos. You're focusing on a cross section of society that's comes from everything. So
Well, the Federation of Canadian Naturists, which is the national organization in Canada, did a survey. And the last edition of the survey was from 2014. But in that survey, they found something like 80% of people sleep naked all or part of the time. Over 50% of people would be willing to try, social or being naked outdoors if they hadn't already. And something like 10 or 15% of people were, I don't know if they call themselves nudists, but had partaken in naked recreation. Well, that's not a small number of people. That's a lot. There's millions of people,
yeah.
And to treat them as weird space aliens is not. It doesn't get to any kind of truth. The fact is, it's a segment of society, and I don't partake in square dancing, but I know there are people who do, and they have their conventions and they get together, and I hooray for them. That's great that they do that. I just want that kind of respect and space for what I do as well.
For more information to get your copy of Matthew's books or to check out his blog, go to his website, which is writenude.com. That's WRITE nude.com.
You can follow us on all the various socials. Our website is whythepodcast.com and has all sorts of additional stories and videos. It's also where you can sign up for our newsletter. We're also on YouTube if you're into that kind of thing. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, because if you don't, we'll call your mother and tell her that she's completely right. You would look so much prettier if you smiled more.
Why the Podcast is part of Mudhouse Media. Today's show was produced by myself and Heidi Hegquist. Our reluctant executive producers are John Sauvé and Sandy Stone. Our willing executive producers are Rachel Allen and Randy Jeanette. Our graphic designer is Samantha Mustonen. The theme song was performed by the Electrosynth-O-Magnetic Polyphonic Orchestra. This one's for Philippe. Thanks for joining us. Flash, we're coming home.
Nigel, is that you? Are you here, Nigel?